I'll be guiding us through the next hour. First, I'd like to acknowledge that our location at 49th Avenue and Oak Street in Vancouver is where we gather on unceded and ancestral territory of the Musqueam Nation of the Coast Salish people. I'd also like to acknowledge the leadership and inspiration that Indigenous leaders, elders, families, and individuals provide all of us in the environmental and social justice movements. Indigenous leaders and elders are ever present and give legitimacy to rallies and marches, through press releases, through nonviolent action, through legal battles, and through ceremonies. And we really give thanks for that. This evening will be all about a play written by our own Mairy Beam. Mairy, would you like to just wave because we're still all on the large screen here. Mairy is a member of UCV and a former board member, and she has been an active member of the resistance to pipeline construction. She was arrested, charged with breaking the TMX injunction, protesting peacefully in front of the gates of Westbridge Marine Terminal in Burnaby. She was found guilty and sentenced to 28 days of house arrest and 125 hours of community service, most of which she did in the Unitarian Church youth program. She is not just a grandmother, she is also a sinister sister, which is the name of well, she'll tell you a little bit more about that. And she has written a play about these events of arrests and court appearances, which was produced at the Carnegie Center about a year ago, and more recently at the Fringe Festival this fall. Joining her in this production are two of the original actors, Karl Perrin, thank you, Karl, and Vivian Davidson. Where are you, Vivian? There you go. We are so proud of all of you. Karl is a lifelong Unitarian born in the US and a resident of Canada since 1970. He's been chairperson of the Environment Committee and remains an active member. He is a sometime Sunday service speaker and founding member of BROKE, which stands for Burnaby Residents Opposed to Kinder Morgan Expansion, or for that matter, any pipeline expansion. Because of course, it's no longer Kinder Morgan's pipeline, it's now taxpayers' pipeline through TMX, TransMountain Expansion. And now we taxpayers own this pipeline, this project. Vivian Davidson is an actor, activist, and athlete. She also recently became a producer and filmmaker and has been a proud Unitarian for 6 years. At UCV, she has taken on a lot of roles and she loves and communes with the spirit and ethos of the congregation members. The byline at the foot of her emails reads, "To be truly radical is to make hope possible rather than despair convincing." And I think that could be a theme of this evening. During the presentation of the play, it's important to create a theater. And so we're going to do that by, actually it will be done technically by Cindy using Spotlight. So it would be useful if everybody is on speaker view. And then what will happen is that you will only see the images of the three actors. You won't see any other images until the end of the play. And then we will revert back to normal screen like this. We want you back after that for question and answer. And so there are two ways you can participate in that. You can either write your question in the chat as you think of it, or you can save it up to the end and we will be looking at those chat questions, but we will also be just doing responding to people who put up a hand, or one way of doing it is you put up your finger, but if you see that somebody else has one finger up, you look around and then you put your finger up twice meaning that you are second in line or third if you see, but I will try to facilitate that. So with those instructions, I will turn it over to Mairy.
Thank you, Catherine, and thanks to everybody who came tonight. So yes, my inspiration for this play was attending the BC Supreme Court court building at 800 Smythe Street and listening to the wonderful speeches that the activists gave and their interaction with the judge as they tried to convince him of their the right of their cause. So that was very inspiring. So I created this docudrama, and it's based mostly on the court records from the trials of the activists. So I'd like to tell you the roles of there we go, of Karl. Karl will be playing Judge Affleck, Judge Fitzpatrick, and the Crown Prosecutor Monty Rattan. And Vivian will be playing Murray Rice, Laurie Embry, and herself in a small role at the end. And I'll be playing the narrator. So, and I'm also going to be when we did this live, we had QLab and we were projecting things, and I'm going to try to do it with slides. And so please bear with me if I'm a little rough on that part. So I'm going to share screens. Yeah. So we are on the land of the Coast Salish peoples. We are so grateful to these nations who have cared for this land for time immemorial, until it was stolen by settlers who believe the land is a resource to be used, who have raped and pillaged in the pursuit of the almighty dollar, stolen by my people. This makes me deeply ashamed. Look at this map, 980 kilometers of pipe to be laid so they can transport an additional 590,000 barrels of tar per day, the equivalent to 20 million cars on the road every day. We're in a climate crisis, for God's sake. We have to stop this pipeline. But how? Nothing seems to work. So in December 2017, we turned to civil disobedience, peaceful civil disobedience. Meet the Justin Trudeau Brigade. TransMountain Pipeline responds by suing these activists, claiming they are causing the company irreparable harm. In February, the Coast Salish nations get involved and call for a rally to be held on March 10th. It promises to be big, and this makes TransMountain nervous. TransMountain goes to court, to the Supreme Court of BC, asking for an injunction. The proposed injunction is not good news. It's like a preemptive strike. Anyone who tries to interfere in their operations can be immediately arrested and charged with contempt of court. In other words, the BC Supreme Court would be intervening on behalf of TransMountain. Maureen Karl, counsel for TransMountain, presents the case for the injunction to BC Supreme Court Judge Affleck.
My lord, here we have extraordinary losses. It is undisputed that TransMountain has incurred substantial cost and delay, none of which will be recoverable from these defendants. And that harm is irreparable. TransMountain has all the permits, all the authority, all the legal right to do what they are doing. This project has been declared by the Cabinet of Canada to be in the best interest of Canada.
I am satisfied that if the schedule is significantly disrupted, there will be much cost and inconvenience. I must also be mindful of the fact that the Government of Canada has expressly authorized the work because it is determined, notwithstanding the passionate opposition to it by many, that it is in the national interest. I've concluded that the defendants and others who have notice of an injunction must be restrained from obstructing the plaintiff's construction works at the Burnaby Mountain and Westridge sites. I will add that the injunction will apply not only to the defendants, but to all persons who have notice of the injunction. The task that I am faced with is to find a means to protect the right of the defendants to protest and to protest vigorously. Nevertheless, that protest cannot take the form of active interference with the lawful construction work carried on by the plaintiff. There will be an injunction, one that carries on indefinitely.
A 2019 study of over 100 injunctions found 75% of injunctions filed by corporations against First Nations were granted, compared with only 19% of injunctions filed by First Nations against corporations. So it's no surprise when the injunction is granted. It's in place as of March 16th, 2018, and goes into eternity. No one is allowed to come within 5 minutes. Sorry. No one is allowed to come within 5 minutes of the TransMountain sites anywhere in the province. But the injunction does not have the desired effect. It attracts activists rather than repels them. In the next 3 weeks, more than 150 people are charged with civil contempt of court for defying the injunction. The injunction is read, they're given the chance to leave, and those who do not heed the warning are arrested and led off to a tent where they are charged and released. We are happy that CTV and other media are present to cover the arrest. For one thing, it has an impact on the conduct of the RCMP, and it publicizes our cause. But the judge is not happy with the publicity. He is upset that his injunction is being publicly flouted. He starts his campaign to have the charges upped from civil contempt to criminal contempt. Eventually, the Attorney General agrees. The activists, whether they plead guilty or opt for a trial, give many inspiring speeches in court, attempting to convince the judge of the rightness of our cause. Here's Murray Reese.
I want to thank you, Your Honor, for allowing this opportunity to explain why I took the action for which I am pleading guilty. You see, the first time I committed civil disobedience, I was 19. It was 1964, and the existential threat was nuclear war. I sat on a dirt road in rural Quebec with a group of activists attempting to prevent access to a Royal Canadian Air Force station armed with dozens of nuclear missiles. I'm now 72. On March 23rd, I stood in front of another gate, attempting to stop construction of the TransMountain pipeline. It seems like nothing less than the impending end of the world gets me to put my body down on the line. I wish I was exaggerating. There is simply no place on a livable planet for this totally unnecessary, utterly destructive, climate destabilizing pipeline carrying the world's dirtiest, most carbon-intensive oil. I'll conclude my statement with a short poem that I wrote when Stephen Harper was still Prime Minister. Much to my regret, it needs no updating. Gross domestic product. Our Prime Minister scouring the Arctic for natural resources, zinc and copper, nickel, lead, her whole hoarded mineral wealth to be ripped from the thawing earth and shipped to China. And I can't help but think of the gold pried loose from my grandfather's teeth, the hair yanked free from my grandmother's scalp, the fat they rendered from my cousin's plump tuchus. Never again. We promise each other after every new debauch, and we might even mean it for that moment. But we don't know how to stop, dear planet. We are sore in need of help. Could you round up a few of your closest friends and sit us down, lock the doors, seal the windows, and stage an intervention on our behalf? Oh, you already did? The floods, the hurricanes, the wildfires, the droughts? Oh, You already did.
During the spring and summer of 2018, the activists continued to block the roadway into the tank farm. Crown lawyer Monte Rattan, who has been acting as the chief prosecutor, is not happy.
As of today, 214 individuals have been arrested. This demonstrates that the disobedience to this court's order is large scale and ongoing. This disobedience directly challenges the rule of law in this province. This court shall not throw up its hands and accept that widespread lawlessness will continue. Although the actions of these two were peaceful, each willfully disobeyed the court's order. Canada is a country founded on the rule of law.
By stealing land from Native people.
Crown says that their actions are in no way rash behavior, which would call for particular leniency for first offenders. The majority of individuals convicted in these contempt proceedings are otherwise law-abiding and frequently senior citizens. And so this is the population that the Crown says must be deterred. They must be sentenced to jail time. If seniors are not at risk of jail, the organizers may encourage only seniors who appear quite willing to do so in large numbers to breach the injunction in the future. The large-scale disobedience is a particularly sinister challenge to the court's authority. And so the Crown says that the 7-day jail sentence is appropriate for each of them.
Boo!
The judge, as usual, follows the lead of Crown Counsel.
The purpose of contempt proceedings is to protect the rule of law, the organizing principle which distinguishes a civilized society from anarchy. In its struggle to preserve the rule of law and to ensure its own continued effectiveness, the court's only device is its power to punish. I'm concerned that there needs to be a general deterrence. It is regrettable that prison sentences must be imposed in the circumstances of these proceedings, but I am satisfied that that must now be the outcome.
Listen to Laurie Ambry, who was in the first group sent to prison.
Your Honor, I have lived my 70 years abiding by the law. Please allow me to explain why I have chosen to break one. If we look back into our history, there have been many shameful times when our laws have supported injustices. In the 18th century, there were laws that supported child labor to the benefit of the industrialists of the time. In the 19th century, laws were created to support the ownership of Black people to the benefit of plantation owners. In the 20th century, we made laws that allowed us to take Native children away from their parents and place the rest of the family on reserves to the benefit of the Europeans that wanted their land. All of those laws were created through the judicial system that you are a part of, sir. But they were actually designed by influential people behind the scenes that would profit from them. Our judicial system is still being manipulated by the rich and powerful that have the influence to make the legal system work for them. And I truly believe that when we have laws that support injustices, it is the duty of all good men and women to stand up and challenge those laws. And this injunction, sir, that you have granted is unjust. It supports an industry that has been scientifically proven to be harming the whole world and every living thing in it. Today, I feel privileged and proud to be standing on my side of the bench.
Affleck finally retires in December 2019, and we have a new judge, Shelley Fitzpatrick. We have high hopes that she might have more of an open mind, even though she, like Affleck, was appointed by Stephen Harper. In December of 2019, Indigenous elders Jim Layden and Stacey Gallagher were present at a gathering of activists near the tank farm. As Jib led a pipe ceremony at the end of the rally, he was briefly on the road in an area prohibited by the injunction, as was Stacy. Several weeks later, they were informed that they were charged with contempt of court. This despite the fact that the two RCMP officers present had not issued any warnings and had in fact joined in the pipe ceremony. Note that none of the white activists present were charged, even though several of them had previously been convicted. Here are the quotes from Judge Fitzpatrick during their trial.
What are you calling the Aboriginal law that I should be applying here? What is the law? To follow the eagle or the killer whale with her dead calf? I mean, what is it exactly? You're telling me that the grandmothers can authorize anybody, any Indigenous person in British Columbia, to walk onto any what they consider to be unceded territory and do whatever the heck they want? I find Chief Wilson's testimony troubling and objectionable. She was the general sending her foot soldier into the breach to take the bullet for the cause while standing herself safely on the side of the road. The offer by the contemners to do community work service is hardly meaningful. They are already very engaged in that type of work, yet those altruistic endeavors have failed to instill any greater attitude of respect for the court. There is no higher imperative in respect of the injunction.
Justice Fitzpatrick found both Indigenous elders guilty of criminal contempt of court. She had no qualms discounting the 5-step arrest process in the injunction as discretionary on the part of the RCMP. No dispersal orders or arrests needed. In other words, TransMountain can take videos of people allegedly in violation of the injunction and share it directly with the Crown. And that's all it takes to initiate a prosecution against someone. According to Fitzpatrick, the police don't even need to be involved. Nor does she have any qualms about sending Indigenous elders in frail health to prison during a pandemic. The Crown is expected to request up to 3 months in prison for these 2 Indigenous elders when their sentencing hearings are held in the next couple of months. And it's not just Affleck and Fitzpatrick. It's also the 3 judges who heard David Gutherham's appeal, who declare there is no imminent peril from climate change, so the necessity defense has no air of reality. It's hard not to get discouraged. All these fine speeches, people going to jail, what did it accomplish? Nothing. It seems we can make no headway when our government buys this pipeline, when the RCMPs state that they consider TransMountain an industrial partner, when CISA spies on activists, when the NEB and its replacement, the Canada Energy Regulator, are staffed with oil industry insiders, when TransMountain employs former RCM people, when TransMountain employs former RCMP as their security agents, and when the Crown lawyers take evidence from these former RCMP agents now working for TransMountain. It's really hard.
But we can't give up. We need to fight for the future of our youth. We're going to die of old age, but they're going to die from climate change. Collectively, let us never rest.
Thank you. Okay, so we can now take off the spotlights and allow people to unmute.
I didn't hear the poem at the end. Can we
Oh,
read it out?
Yeah, it would be nice to hear it read.
you couldn't hear it?
No.
No.
Oh. Okay. Vivian, do you want to read it?
Fantastic, yes. Let us be gnats in the ears of empire, ever multiplying, ever agitating, ever disturbing the so-called peace. Let us be so small and numerous that they cannot ignore us. Individually, let us take turns. Collectively, let us never rest. It's beautiful. I love it.
Mhm.
Thanks, Mary, for that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, in the recording, the youth read it. So I'm sorry that didn't work.
Well, I would throw this open to questions. I don't see any in the chat, but I may be missing something.
And it's questions about anything, you know, anything TransMountain related, climate change related.
Yeah, no, Mary, thanks so much for putting that together. This is Yvonne. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You mentioned that they would possibly, that Jim and Stacy would possibly be sentenced to 3 months. What, do you have a date? When is their court date? Do you know?
Jim
Yes.
is March the 2nd. Is it March the 2nd?
That is so highly disturbing. The details of that, I had not realized that the pipe ceremony took place. They weren't served at the time. Those are details I had no idea about. I thought that it was the same as before, where they were read the injunction and everything. But this is incredibly disturbing, you know, to hear.
Yes.
Disturbing all times, but I mean, especially now that I understand the sequence of events.
Yes. It was weeks afterwards before they even knew that they were charged for their activities on that day. So it's, and why did they pick on those two? I think they've decided that they're the ringleaders, and so they're targeting them.
But these officers took part in the ceremony?
Well, they were in the circle. I don't think they actually smoked the pipe, but they were in the circle and passed the pipe on.
I see.
So this was near the watch house?
I
think it was in front of the gates, the
think so too.
Enbridge gates. Yeah.
Right.
So the Westridge gates, I mean.
Yeah, Stacy and Jim have been, are Indigenous elders that have been holding down the
Oh yeah, no, I think most.
watch house.
Yeah, well, they don't live in it anymore, do they? I mean, they had for a while lived in it, but I thought, are they even allowed to go into it still?
Yes,
I think they
were
are.
given.
Okay, that's good.
I see a question from Jesse. You mentioned that CSIS has been spying on the activists. How do we know about this?
So this has been in the news quite often. In the play, I have actual a news release of when one of the times it was in the news. So again, I can't tell you offhand, but I can tell you it's been in there, and they particularly target the Indigenous activists. If you want, Jesse, I can send you a reference after.
That would be great, Mary.
Okay.
Martha.
I've watched and heard the play a number of times, and I don't remember the speech that you had included tonight by Justice Fitzgerald, and I was just appalled at the blatant racism in that speech. It just shocked me. This isn't a question, it's just a comment. But I don't know if that speech wasn't in the other versions of the play or what, or if I just wasn't listening carefully before. But yeah, that just shocked me.
Yeah, she's quite sarcastic. She says, "What are you calling me?" This was in the stage performance as well.
Was it okay? I missed it.
What are you? But not at the Carnegie Center. And she says, "What are you calling the Aboriginal law that I should be applying here? What is the law? To follow the eagle or the killer whale with her dead calf? I mean, what is it exactly?"
Yeah.
It's just so
Yeah.
insulting.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting because, Karl, do you want to give your perspective on Affleck?
Yes, well, I was in court when, in the gallery, when he made this statement about that his task is to enforce the injunction or to create the injunction and thereby assure the safety of the construction continuing uninterrupted. But then he also says that my job is to ensure that is also to find the means to protect the right of the defendants to protest and to protest vigorously. And when I was in court, I was a little surprised to hear that this guy is going to help us to protest vigorously. But, you know, that's his narrow focus on exactly what the law says. A lot of the defendants were saying, wait a minute, the law itself is the problem here, the law of the colonial government. And, you know, so within the framework of the law, the Canadian law, then he's saying, well, I just have to do what my job is, and that is to protect those who are legally doing the construction. And I remember also there was Gordon Cornwall, who was defending himself and said something about climate change. And Affleck said, you don't have to lecture me on climate change. My cabin burned up this summer up in the woods, 2018. So anyway, so I played him in a relatively neutral way. He's not just the bad guy. He's not really the bad guy. The law, as Mairy was saying, the law that he's paid to uphold is the problem. And of course, that comes up again with Fitzpatrick when she says that at the end of her speech that there is no higher imperative. There is no law higher than the injunction. There is no nothing that supersedes the injunction. She's saying the law is the highest, and in this case, that's the injunction. So that kind of negates the attempt by the defendants to say that they were following a higher law. And of course, that's very subjective. What is a higher law?
I was going to ask you, Mairy, if you wanted to make some comment about David
Perrin?
Yes, about his argument, because that was an attempt to widen the stage, if you like.
Right. So that was this defense of necessity, which several of the activists tried to employ. But so you're allowed to break a law if there's some kind of imminent peril, you know. So if you could smash open a window if you're going to rescue a child from a fire, for example. So if there's some kind of imminent peril. So for many of the activists, we feel that climate change is imminent peril. But Judge Affleck and the 3 judges from the Court of Appeal all said, no. You know, they could come up with a technological solution, or, you know, who knows, something could happen. So it's not imminent. There's no imminent peril. Therefore, you can't plead the defense of necessity. That was,
And it has been tried in other parts of the world too, in the US. And there was some hope that that would be a successful avenue. And it came close, I believe. Is that not right?
yeah, I'm not sure of the details of that. But what I think I've seen being in the court, all this, is that it's so easy for the judges to just do whatever the Crown suggests that they do, to do what's been done in the past. You know, they build all their cases about this is the precedent, this is the precedent, this is precedent. So it takes a really strong, courageous judge to say, no, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to allow the defense of necessity. It would have to be a very strong judge to do that. And we just haven't seen, you know, somebody like Murray Sinclair, for example. And we haven't seen any judges of that quality with that daring on this case.
I think in the David Guterheim case that the defense of necessity was turned down because the climate change peril was not considered imminent.
Right.
So perhaps if it had been, you know, someone from the island of Vanuatu whose house was swept away by rising oceans, then that would have been considered more imminent.
Right.
Do you want to mention, Karl, the appeal which is now underway from Tim Tuccaro, where the whole legislative process is being put into question? The fact that in the initial decision-making process didn't allow for any consideration of downstream carbon, so meaning that they own in their figures, they counted the carbon that would be pulled out of the ground at the site of the extraction, but they did not count the downstream. That is where, when that oil is burned, they didn't count that, and nobody was allowed to testify with those figures. Tim Tuccaro has brought an appeal based on that, and I don't know when that will be heard. Do you know when that will be heard?
No, I'm not sure what you're referring to. I don't think I've heard about it.
Okay.
Dr. Tim Tuccaro is a medical doctor as well as professor in health sciences at SFU. And many of his, he's a very good activist as well. And what you're referring to is, what I'm thinking of is the report by SFU Professor Mark Jacquard, which identified that of the 20 million cars of greenhouse gases, which would be the greenhouse gases of that many cars would be produced every day, 2,000 were from production in Alberta and shipping to Burnaby, and 18,000 would be burning the fuel ultimately in wherever it's burned, outside of Canada. And according to the UN ways of counting things, it's only the GHGs that are produced within the boundaries of a nation that are counted for that nation. So that's unfortunate, but that's where the 20 million comes from, is 2 million within Canada, 18 million outside of Canada if it's exported.
John.
Per day.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit of a tangent, but I think the reason for that is the international agreements about cutting back on emissions. Each country is responsible for their own. So at some point, you know, if that oil is shipped to China, then those 18,000 cars worth of emissions
18 million.
need to be counted by China in their package. You know,
Right.
It's a bit arbitrary, but I mean, well, you got to divide it up somehow, I guess, and that's where the conundrum is, I think.
Yeah.
I see, I see a question from Rosemary. Could you describe again the critical reasoning by the judges to transition the charges from civil to criminal? I realize that they just wanted a more serious threat to discourage more civil disobedience, but I think Rosemary is asking what reasons
Yeah.
did they, other than that?
So the difference between civil contempt and criminal contempt is publicity. So it's bad enough if you disobey an injunction, but if you do it in the public eye, if there's media there, well, then it's a more serious crime because you're not only breaking the injunction, but you are probably encouraging others to do it too. So the reason why Judge Affleck wanted it increased to criminal contempt was because of the media that was present during the arrests and the fact that it was so public. So,
And did he say that as his reason?
yes.
Yes. And that was known beforehand, I think, at least I knew of it. I wasn't surprised when it went from civil to criminal. But on the other hand, there's a difference in terms of the degree of proof required. So for civil contempt, it's 50% plus one, it doesn't have to be guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It just has to be reasonable,
Mhm.
And with criminal contempt, it has to be, 95% sure that the person is guilty. So the phrase beyond a reasonable doubt applies in a criminal case, but doesn't apply in a civil case. And so, but nonetheless, there were very few that attempted to try to go with a not guilty plea, but the one who did was Kat. What's her name? Kat Rivas?
Rivas, yeah, Kat
Rivas.
Rivas was the
Kat
only
Rivas,
one.
that was in the play. That she said, well, I was there with my smudge bowl, giving smudge to people, but there's no evidence that I was actually breaking the injunction. And maybe because she was relatively playful with the judge, challenging him like to a chess game and so on. So that anyway, he found her not guilty. But it was probably because being a criminal case, he thought that she didn't appear to be guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
She didn't have any punishment.
No.
No, she's the only one that the charge was dismissed. I didn't include any of the Indigenous activists and their stories tonight because I didn't have Indigenous actors, which we really tried in all our productions to have Indigenous people speaking their own words. But they were very compelling, the defenses put on by them. They had such dignity in the courtroom.
Cindy.
I muted people, by the way, just because there was interference sounds. I was a little bit confused by I think you said, Mary, that the injunction zone was 5 minutes from?
5 meters.
Oh, 5 meters, okay. But
She did say 5 minutes.
Yeah.
She meant 5 meters.
If that was a very vague way of explaining it, that if you could walk there in 5 minutes or something, okay. But the other piece was where they were arrested, but like, I remember before, like when Tomiko and her family were arrested, there was like an exact spot, like a line. And because they had drawn the line in the wrong place, those cases were all thrown out. So was there an exact spot that these people were intentionally over when they did this, that ceremony that basically they were not even arrested or warned or anything? Was that done in an exact spot that was definitely over the injunction zone then?
I don't think there's any line drawn on the dirt where people just are supposed to know where 5 meters is.
So was it in
Is that right?
5 meters though?
Yeah. It was,
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And
But I
actually,
think what happened, oh, sorry, I defer to you, Karl. You probably know exactly what happened, and I'm just guessing.
so the judge drew the line, the theoretical line, as 5 meters from the property line, and the property line is outside the fence line. So if people didn't know that, and if they were less than 5 meters from the fence line, they would have been in the injunction zone. And then at the Westridge facility, it was 5 meters from the fence line. So it made it a little bit different. And then also Cask Brothers up the road, the Barnett Highway, where the workers were getting on the bus. That was also included as one of the injunction zones.
So they were definitely doing their ceremony intentionally within the 5 meters. And
I have no idea.
but I was actually really shocked that they didn't warn them or any of those things. That was really shocking that they were allowed to do that and just arrest without the normal rights in place. That's really shocking.
Yeah, especially given that the RCMP were there. Like
They could have warned them while they were there, but it sounds intentional to be there as though you're participating and not warn and then charge.
Yeah,
very shocking.
I wouldn't want people to, oh, sorry, Rosemary, go ahead.
Okay. I'm unmuted, right? Yeah. I just seem to remember in 2014 on the actual Burnaby Mountain, those arrests there were, lines drawn. Yes, the GPS coordinates were wrong. And before people got arrested, they were told by an officer that, do you realize that if you step over this line, you will be arrested? And they said, yes, I do. And then they marched over. So that is more clear, but it sounds really unjust, unfair that these people did not have, nobody told them if you move this much, you're in violation, so it's, but nobody argued that, huh?
well, they did argue that, but the judge said no. These people had already been arrested before, so they knew everything about the injunction, so it wasn't necessary to do any of that, and the police don't even need to be there. All we need is this video evidence, and then we can see that they're guilty and off to jail.
Wow.
I wouldn't want people to go away thinking that this is the end of the story, because there is lots of stuff happening. Karl, do you want to give a little rundown of what your role is in the present scene?
You mean in terms of the suit?
No, in terms of the tank farm stuff and the
future things.
Yeah, the process.
We want to.
Okay, well, in a way, this is a tangent, but it's to me hugely significant that the existing tanks are extremely dangerous and fragile, so that an earthquake would definitely start a fire in the tanks. And because right now where I am, right here on Burnaby Mountain, we're above the intersection of the only 2 escape routes from SFU and this residential neighborhood called Universe City. And so that my wife is allergic to smoke, and she would probably die and if there was a tank fire, and the smoke is coming up here, and we have no way of preventing smoke from coming into our apartment and no way of getting off the mountain. So we've been to Ministry of Environment, and they connected us to the Ministry of Public Safety. Finally, after our MLAs had worked to make that happen. And then the response we got from the Ministry of Public Safety in Victoria was that they didn't have the authority to do anything to prevent the danger, but they recognized that what we said was the danger was in fact true, and that we would be fried up here or smoked to death. And so now we've gone to SFU, and the vice president of SFU, who's the key person, finance and administration, and I'm sure he is involved with the insurance costs of the liability of having 30,000 people up here who are the responsibility of the university to keep safe and healthy. And so at the moment it's being done kind of behind closed doors. So one of the professors who's on our team is going to be speaking with him again. We had a meeting with him with student representatives and faculty representatives and myself in November. And then this faculty person is going to be speaking to him January 20th. And then we'll see if we can go to the president, who's new. The last president said it was unacceptable, but then did nothing about it. So we're hoping that the new president will be more active. And it's to their benefit. They don't want to be smoked to death either. So we'll see.
There are lots of other things that are going on too. I'm involved in a prayer circle, meaning that there are 4 of us who are going to peacefully and prayerfully or meditationally sit until we are arrested. We'll just have to see what happens with that. And there is a support circle for that. For any of these single actions, it really requires a group of probably 10 people on the ground to support that. So we do have a circle of supporters, and any of you would be welcome to join that. And every other Saturday, because of COVID, we meditate or pray or whatever people choose to do outside on that Saturday, and then we meet in a Zoom conversation and pass on information. So that is available. I see that we're really almost out of time, and I want to make sure that I give lots of thanks for this, but I will say what we usually do on an action evening is on the dot of 8 o'clock, we go away for 2 minutes, which allows people who, have had enough input and they've got better things to do to gracefully do that. And we continue with questions and answers, but nothing is taped in the second half hour. So knowing that, I hope any of you who want to stay and hear more of the other things that are going on to do that. So at this point, I want to say a very big thank you to all of you who came, the players, the writer, and all our Zooming guests for having come and participated. And I especially want to acknowledge Cindy Cashin, who has been our technical wizard tonight with very short notice to do almost everything. And she's handled this technical side almost single-handed, and I really appreciate that. We hope you go away from this play with a rekindled sense of the dedication and determination of ordinary people who step up to live their values, and also with a picture of the inertia, like that of a great big boulder of any big system. And we hope the evening provokes your curiosity and wondering if you might become just another little droplet wearing away at this large stony-faced system. After all, we created it, so we should be able to change it. We always have a couple of asks at the end of our evenings. And we didn't underline that Broke has a web page, and on that web page, it has a donate button. And the monies from that largely go to the defense of Indigenous people who have been arrested and are facing court and loss of income and all those other things that happen. So you could donate money to Broke, and you can look that up very easily online. You could also walk the Brunette River and see what's happening there and now, and I'll talk more about that after. You could look up Brunette River Restoration online, and you will see, without walking it, you will see a beautiful short video of that river and the restoration that's taken place. You could write the politician of your choice. Burnaby, New Westminster, Coquitlam, all three councils are resisting at this moment in time, are resisting the cutting of trees. So you could write in support of them, or you could write to your MLA or to your MP to let them know what you think about this, and spread the word, talk about it, talk particularly about the alternatives to the pipeline. There are many other ways that we could be helping out Alberta and also pushing our economy in a direction that would make pipelines, particularly diluted bitumen pipelines, completely irrelevant. So you could do any of those things. We are at 3 minutes too, so maybe we should allow a 3-minute break, or should we allow a 2-minute break, or should we allow questions from now until the witching hour of 8 o'clock? Or does anybody have a burning question right now that we could squeeze in? Then I suggest that we take our 2-minute break now and come back right at 8 o'clock.
I see Cynthia is saying something here.
I missed that. Sorry, Cynthia.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd just like to add thanks, personal thanks too, to the actors, the writers. I think it's a marvelous way of trying to get out the information. Really, really neat. I wish there were many more avenues for you to be able to do that. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing, Catherine, and all your team. This is a really neat little way of educating ourselves. Thank you.
So welcome.
Wonderful.
Okay. We're in your hands now, Cindy, and we'll come back.
Well, let's do a 2-minute break for a bio break, and anybody that has to go, thank you for coming, and ta-ta. See you next time, next Wednesday.
I think I will take a little break. Smile.